Welcome back. It's great to have you here again. As always, we're bringing you the latest and most relevant updates from the Institute for the Study of War, so you can stay informed and ahead of the curve. If you haven't already, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. By doing so, you'll never miss an update, and you'll help us grow and bring you even more valuable content. Thanks for being part of our community, and let's dive right into today's report. Russian forces conducted a limited drone and missile strike campaign in Ukraine overnight on March 21st to 22nd, indicating that Russian forces continue struggling with precision missile shortages. The Ukrainian General Staff reported that Russian forces conducted 21 drone strikes targeting residential and infrastructure areas in Kyiv, Zhytomyr, Zaporizhia, and Odessa oblasts, and Ukrainian forces shot down 16 of the drones. Ukrainian officials stated that Russian forces struck 2 residential high-rise buildings in Zaporizhia city, killing at least 1 civilian and injuring 33. Russian forces conducted more intensive and wider-ranging strikes during the fall 2022 air and missile campaign, suggesting that Russian forces may now be rationing their use of high-precision munitions for these strike campaigns, or may simply lack the necessary munitions to sustain strike campaigns at their earlier pace and intensity. Head of the Ukrainian Joint Coordination Press Center of the Southern Forces Natalia Humeniuk stated that the Russian missile strike threat remains high, but that Russian forces would likely only conduct a limited campaign. Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu announced that the Russian Ministry of Defense, MOD, intends to increase the size of Russia's air defense forces at a Russian MOD Collegium on March 22. Shoigu stated that one of the Russian Aerospace Forces, VKS, development priorities is to generate more air defense units with advanced air defense systems. He noted that in 2023 Russian forces planned to form a new air defense division and brigade, form a special-purpose air defense missile brigade, form a new anti-aircraft missile regiment with more advanced S-350 systems, form a military transport aviation regiment, and complete the modernization of Moscow City's air defense systems. Shoigu also commented on Russian combat experience in Ukraine, stating that Russian pilots conducted over 140,000 combat sorties since February 24, 2022, and that 90% of operational tactical and army aviation, 60% of strategic long-range aviation, and 85% of UAV operators have combat experience. The Russian military is unlikely to generate such forces within several years, let alone by the end of 2023. Russia's defense industrial base has historically experienced multi-year delays in developing advanced air defense systems, even before the strict sanctions and exacerbated resource constraints resulting from Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Current Russian air defense brigades and regiments received their S-400 systems up to several years behind schedule. The Russian military had only fielded the S-500 system, which was reportedly supposed to enter production in 2015, in one Russian air defense army by 2021. Russia also delayed its planned delivery of a second S-400 battery to India in 2022 due to constraints caused by Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Russia may eventually grow its air defense forces as part of a larger effort to recreate a large conventional military in the long term, however. Shoigu's announcement is similar to his previous announcement at an MOD Collegium in December 2022, in which Shoigu stated that Russia seeks to form 17 new maneuver divisions over several years. The formation of new Russian air defense and airlift units will not increase Russian combat power in Ukraine this year. Shoigu's statement is likely intended to reassure the Russian people that the Russian MOD is continuing to develop the Russian military as a world-class military power to offset perceptions about Russian military failures in Ukraine. Shoigu likely signaled to Japan that it should not attempt to exploit Russia's current military vulnerability in the Kuril Islands, and to China that Russia remains a worthwhile military partner. Shoigu extolled the strength of Russia's Eastern Military District, EMD, at length and announced that the EMD deployed a battery of Bastion coastal defense missile systems on Paramushar Island, an island in the northern portion of the Russian-occupied Japanese Kuril Islands. Shoigu's statement was likely a warning signal to Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida, who visited Kiev and Bucha on March 21, about becoming too engaged in supporting Ukraine. The Russian Eastern Military District is severely degraded. Significant Russian EMD elements deployed to Belarus and were badly damaged during the Battle of Kiev in early 2022. Russian EMD elements of the 155th and 40th Naval Infantry Brigades recently fought and suffered heavy losses near Volodar in Donetsk Oblast in early 2023. The 155th has been destroyed and reconstituted as many as 8 times in the past year. Shoigu's statement was also likely a signal to Chinese President Xi Jinping that Russia supports Chinese security objectives in East Asia and remains a viable military partner despite the terrible damage Ukraine has inflicted on the Russian military. Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu walked away and refused to answer a question about how soon to expect peace in Ukraine. A journalist from the Russian Ministry of Defense-run media outlet TV Zvezda first asked Shoigu how the war will end, to which Shoigu responded, "Any war ends in peace." The journalist then asked Shoigu how soon to expect peace in Ukraine. Shoigu did not answer the question and walked away. TV Zvezda originally aired the footage of Shoigu walking away but cut it in a later release. ISW previously reported that the Kremlin aims to set information conditions and prepare the Russian information space for a protracted war. The tempo of Russian operations around Bakhmut appears to be slowing amid Western reporting that Russian forces may be attempting to launch offensives in other directions. Russian forces made additional marginal advances in southern Bakhmut, and Ukrainian forces conducted counterattacks on the southwestern and northwestern outskirts of the city on March 21 and 22. The Ukrainian General Staff reported on March 22 that Russian forces' offensive potential in the Bakhmut area is declining, and Ukrainian officials have previously reported fewer combat clashes in the city itself in recent days. U.S. National Security Council spokesperson John Kirby stated on March 21 that Russian and Ukrainian forces are continuing to prioritize operations around Bakhmut and that Russian forces might try to conduct another offensive, possibly in many different directions. The United Kingdom Ministry of Defense, UK MOD, assessed that Russian forces may be losing momentum in the Bakhmut area because the Russian MOD is relocating units to other directions. Russian forces are currently increasing the tempo of their offensive operations around Avdiivka, aiming to encircle the settlement, and it is possible that Russian forces are doing so at the expense of their operations around Bakhmut and the stalled offensive around Volodar. Russian personnel of the 136th Separate Guards Motorized Rifle Brigade, 58th Combined Arms Army, Southern Military District, previously stated that they were deploying to the Volodar area to conduct assaults, but a Russian millblogger claimed on March 21 that elements of the 136th Motorized Rifle Brigade are operating in the Avdiivka direction. This apparent deployment change, if it is not a result of Russian misreporting, possibly indicates that Russian forces prioritized the intensification of operations around Avdiivka over restarting the offensive on Volodar. Ukrainian Tavrius Defense Forces spokesperson Colonel Alexei Dmitrashkovsky stated on March 19 that Russian forces started increasing assaults in the Avdiivka area to set conditions for restarting offensive operations on Volodar, further suggesting that current Russian offensive operations around Avdiivka are preventing the potential resumption of offensive activities near Volodar. Russian forces appear to be drawing more combat power to the Avdiivka area, which may allow them to increase their rate of advance, although there were no confirmed Russian advances in the area on March 22. ISW continues to assess that Russian advances may prompt Ukrainian forces to withdraw from Bakhmut and/or Avdiivka, although neither appears likely at this time. Russian forces may choose to launch or intensify offensive operations in new directions, but these operations would likely produce few tangible results as the overall Russian spring offensive continues to near culmination. ISW has still not observed evidence of the commitment of the Russian 2nd Motorized Rifle Division of the 1st Guards Tank Army, Western Military District, despite reports that it had reconstituted in Belarus and deployed to Luhansk. The Russians may commit this unit to one or more offensives already underway or to a new offensive undertaking. The commitment of this division's 2 or 3 motorized rifle regiments is unlikely to achieve operationally decisive effects, however, given the failure of larger formations to do so. Russian forces may be deploying T-54/55 tanks from long-term storage to Ukraine to compensate for significant armored vehicle losses. The Georgia-based open-source conflict intelligence team research group reported on March 22 that Russian forces transported a train loaded with T-54/55 tanks from Primorsky Krai towards western Russia, and social media sources speculated that Russian forces may deploy them to Ukraine. Dutch open-source group Oryx assessed as of March 22 that Russian forces have lost at least 57 T-90, 448 T-80, 1,025 T-72, 53 T-64, and 73 T-62 tanks in highly attritional fighting in Ukraine. Russian armored vehicle losses are currently constraining the Russian military's ability to conduct effective mechanized maneuver warfare and stalling offensives in Ukraine, and Russian forces may be deploying T-54/55 tanks from storage to Ukraine to augment these offensive operations and prepare for anticipated mechanized Ukrainian counteroffensives. The Soviet Union produced tens of thousands of T-54/55 tanks after the Second World War, and the Russian military may be turning to extensive Soviet reserves of these tanks to solve its significant armored vehicle shortages. The Russian military may also be deciding to field the tanks because parts to repair the T-54/55 tanks are abundantly available and substantially cheaper. T-54/55 tanks lack the armor capabilities of more modern armored equipment, however, and originally carried a smaller main gun, although the Russian military may have modernized some vehicles. The Russian military will likely experience greater numbers of casualties by fielding these older tank systems in Ukraine. The deployment of inferior equipment to replenish the Russian military's ability to conduct mechanized maneuver warfare may prompt a further degradation of Russian manpower in Ukraine. Russian forces are unlikely to achieve preferable resource attrition rates on the grounds that T-54/55 are cheaper than anti-tank guided missile (ATGM) ammunition. As some have argued, each tank loss is the loss of a tank crew as well as the tank, after all, and it is not clear how effective these tanks will be against Ukrainian armored vehicles, whereas they are highly vulnerable to many anti-tank systems available to Ukraine, not all of which are expensive. Russian authorities are cracking down against bars in urban areas, possibly to crack down against internal dissent among Russian social circles. St. Petersburg outlet Fontanka claimed on March 22 that St. Petersburg authorities shut down 24 bars as part of a broader investigation into claims of involving minors in antisocial acts, including systematic drinking, drug use, and vagrancy. This excuse is implausible given normal Russian attitudes towards systematic drinking. Russian Federal Security Service, FSB, personnel conducted recent raids against 2 popular bars and forced patrons to conduct pro-war activities, after which at least one Russian businessman stepped away from his role in managing the bars, as ISW has previously reported. These raids may target rich Russian businessmen like Wagner financier Yevgeny Prigozhin, who failed to deny current ownership of a St. Petersburg bar in his response to a Russian journalist who alleged that Prigozhin owned the bar in June 2022. These measures may also encourage self-censorship within these circles and among bar attendees by publicly displaying the consequences of speaking out of turn. Without further ado, let's dive into the latest land fighting and on-the-ground troop movement updates. Russian forces conducted limited ground attacks along the Svatov-Kreminna line on March 22. The Ukrainian General Staff reported that Russian forces conducted unsuccessful ground attacks near Makiivka, 21 kilometers northwest of Kreminna, Dybrova, 5 kilometers southwest of Kreminna, Bilovarivka, 11 kilometers south of Kreminna, and Vasil, 14 kilometers southeast of Siversk. A Russian millblogger claimed on March 21 that Russian forces conducted ground attacks near Yampolivka, Terny, and Nevsk, all 17 to 19 kilometers northwest of Kreminna, and made unspecified advances towards Bilovarivka. Another millblogger claimed on March 22 that Russian forces attacked towards Novoselivsk, 14 kilometers northwest of Svatov, and Makiivka. Other Russian sources claimed that positional battles continued and that there are no changes in the Starobilsk area of the front line, likely referring to the northern section of the Kupiansk-Svatov line. Russian forces continued to conduct offensive operations in Bakhmut and its environs on March 22. The Ukrainian General Staff reported that Ukrainian forces repelled Russian assaults in southern and northern Bakhmut, within 14 kilometers northwest of Bakhmut in Bodanivka, Kryvorivka, and Orakovo-Vasilivka, and within 21 kilometers southwest of Bakhmut in Predtekine, Ivanivsk, Klishchivka, and Maersk. Ukrainian Ground Forces Commander Colonel General Alexander Syrsky stated that Russian forces continue attempting to advance to the Bakhmut city center from the outskirts. Russian sources claimed that Russian forces cleared most of the industrial territory in Bakhmut, likely referring to the Azom industrial complex in northern Bakhmut. A Russian source also claimed that the Wagner Group continued to advance near Orakovo-Vasilivka, Bodanivka, and southern Bakhmut in the areas of the Mariupol Cemetery and Korsunskovo Street. Geolocated footage published on March 21 showed that Wagner forces made marginal advances in southern Bakhmut. A Kremlin-affiliated millblogger claimed that Wagner mercenaries resumed offensive operations in the direction of Predtekine in a claimed attempt to advance to Kostiantynivka, about 21 kilometers west of Bakhmut, and continued to attack Ivanivsk. A Russian source also claimed that the elements of the 132nd Motorized Rifle Brigade, formerly the Donetsk People's Republic's DNR, 3rd Separate Guards Motorized Rifle Brigade of the 1st Army Corps, are operating near Maersk. Ukrainian forces are conducting tactical counterattacks on Bakhmut's northwestern and southwestern outskirts. The UK Ministry of Defense, MOD, stated that Ukrainian forces initiated a counterattack west of Bakhmut to relieve pressure on the T-0504, H-32, highway to Bakhmut. Geolocated footage published on March 21 showed Ukrainian counterattacks south of Ivanivsk and southeast of Bodanivka. A Russian source also claimed that Ukrainian forces attempted to counterattack near the T-0504 highway. Russian forces are intensifying offensive operations around Avdiivka. The Ukrainian General Staff reported that Ukrainian forces repelled Russian attacks north of Avdiivka in Novokalinov, Novobakhmutivka, Krasnohorivka, Stepov, Lastikine, and Berdikai, west of Severn, Vadiane, Pervomaysk, and Avdiivka. A spokesperson for the Russian Southern Group of Forces stated that elements of the 1st Army Corps are operating in the Avdiivka direction. Russian sources claimed that Russian forces are attacking Avdiivka from two directions, from the Orlivka direction in the north, about 12 kilometers northwest of Avdiivka, to cut Ukrainian supply lines, and from the south via Opitny, about 3 kilometers southeast of Avdiivka. Russian sources also claimed that Russian forces attacked in the direction of Berdikai and are fighting on the eastern outskirts of Stepov. Geolocated combat footage shows the DNR's and Luhansk People's Republic's (LNR) Pyatnashka Volunteer Battalion targeting Ukrainian positions southeast of Avdiivka. Geolocated footage published on March 21 indicates that Russian forces made marginal advances north of Vadiane. Russian forces are launching assault operations west of Donetsk city but have not resumed offensives near Volodar as of this publication. The Ukrainian General Staff reported that Russian forces unsuccessfully attacked Marinka and Pobieda, 22 kilometers and 25 kilometers southwest of Donetsk city, respectively. Russian millbloggers amplified footage on March 21 claiming to show the DNR Kaskad unit fighting in the Volodar area and claimed that Russian Ministry of Internal Affairs employees comprise a significant portion of the unit. Russian sources claimed that Russian forces struck Shkilny airfield in Odessa city on the night of March 21. The Russian Ministry of Defense, MOD, claimed on March 22 that Russian forces struck two hangars with Ukrainian weapons and military equipment at the Shkilny airfield on the outskirts of Odessa city. A Russian millblogger claimed that Ukrainian forces launched the attack on occupied Zankoy in Crimea on March 20 from the Shkilny airfield. Russian forces reportedly intercepted Ukrainian drones near occupied Sevastopol, Crimea. Geolocated footage filmed on March 22 shows likely Russian direct fire against an unidentified object, likely a maritime drone, in the water near Sevastopol Bay, followed by an explosion in the water. Other footage posted on March 22 purportedly shows aerial drones also attacking Sevastopol. Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu claimed on March 22 that two sailors destroyed 3 Ukrainian drones aimed at Russian military facilities in occupied Sevastopol. Odessa Oblast Military Administration spokesperson Serhiy Brachik reported anti-aircraft defense and anti-maritime drone activity over Sevastopol and that Russian authorities halted all maritime traffic near Sevastopol. A Russian millblogger claimed that Ukrainian maritime drones attempted to strike coastal bays in Sevastopol and that Russian forces repelled a Ukrainian surface drone north of Sevastopol. Zaporizhia Occupation Administration Council member Vladimir Rogov claimed that Russian forces also repelled Ukrainian aerial drones with air defenses and small arms. Ukrainian forces continue clearing operations on the east, left, bank of the Dnipro River. Ukrainian Southern Operational Command spokesperson Natalia Humeniuk stated on March 21 that Ukrainian forces continue to clear a 20 to 30 kilometer strip in an unspecified location on the east, left, bank of the Dnipro River to protect the population on the west, right, bank from constant Russian shelling. Humeniuk stated that Ukrainian forces destroyed a Russian ammunition depot on the Kinbrin Spit, preventing Russian forces from shelling from the area for an unspecified period of time. Russian forces conducted routine shelling in Kherson, Zaporizhia, and Dnipropetrovsk oblasts on March 22. The Kremlin continues hybrid reserve call-up and crypto mobilization campaigns to recruit Russians for contract service. Russian sources reported on March 21 that Russian residents in Tyumen and Sverdlovsk oblasts, Karelia and Altai republics, and Krasnodar Krai received military summonses directing them to verify information with military recruitment offices or undergo military training as part of mandatory reserve call-ups. Russian recruitment offices are likely attempting to use mandatory month-long trainings for reservists to pressure them into signing contracts while also shortening the required amount of training that new Russian contract servicemen would need to undergo before deploying to Ukraine after a future involuntary call-up. Russian officials in Yaroslavl, Chelyabinsk, and Moscow oblasts have reportedly started widespread advertisement campaigns for contract service focused on additional promised payments for signing a contract and participating in active offensive actions. The Kremlin is likely conducting this hybrid force generation campaign to avoid declaring a formal second mobilization wave. Ukrainian sources reported that Russian occupation officials continue mobilization measures in occupied territories. Ukrainian Deputy Defense Minister Hanna Maliar reported on March 22 that Russian occupation officials announced large-scale military training exercises for the spring or summer of 2023 to support plans to conscript the entire male population of draft age in Starobilsk, Shkastia, Novoydar, Nizhnetepil, and Novopskov in Luhansk Oblast. Maliar claimed that Russian occupation officials are trying to incentivize potential conscripts by promising them housing taken from Ukrainian citizens forced to leave occupied territories. The Ukrainian Resistance Center reported that Russian occupation officials are preparing for a new wave of mobilization in occupied Donetsk Oblast and that 23 occupation military recruitment offices plan to register young men born in 2006 to create a reserve of residents for future mobilization waves. Kherson Oblast Occupation Administration head Vladimir Saldo announced on March 22 that his administration is forming a volunteer battalion. Saldo claimed that his administration formed the Vasily Margilov Volunteer Battalion to defend against Ukrainian sabotage and reconnaissance activities on the east, left bank and to maintain order in occupied Kherson Oblast. Saldo claimed that the Russian Ministry of Defense, MOD, agreed to fully support the volunteer battalion with arms and equipment and that the formation is currently undergoing combat training. Saldo's decision to form a volunteer battalion is likely aimed at increasing his control over occupied Kherson Oblast and is likely modeled on volunteer battalions that other occupation heads have formed for similar reasons. The delineated public order task of the battalion suggests that the Kherson Oblast Occupation Administration may use the formation as a designated internal security force for further crackdowns. Activity in Russian-occupied areas, Russian objective, consolidate administrative control of and annexed areas, forcibly integrate Ukrainian civilians into Russian socio-cultural, economic, military, and governance systems. Russian officials and occupation authorities continue to advocate for legislative changes in an effort to further legitimize the deportation of Ukrainian children to Russia. Russian Commissioner on Children's Rights Maria Lvova-Belova claimed on March 22 that Russian President Vladimir Putin supported a proposal to assign special statuses to children wounded during the special military operation. Lvova-Belova expressed hopes that there will be an official decree to establish mechanisms to identify these children and provide them with support and benefits. Advisor to the Luhansk People's Republic, LNR, head Rodion Myroshnik stated on March 22 that he agrees with Lvova-Belova's proposal but called for a proposal that extends the special status of children of war to all children in Donbass. Russian occupation officials continue to focus on infrastructure projects that aim to cement Russian control over occupied territories. Zaporizhia Oblast Occupation Deputy Vladimir Rogov claimed on March 21 that the Russian Ministry of Construction developed a bill on the creation of a free economic zone in occupied territories that will focus on business and investment activity. Luhansk People's Republic, LNR, head Leonid Pasechnik claimed on March 22 that 20 industrial enterprises in occupied Luhansk Oblast are interested in applying to a newly established Regional Industrial Development Fund. The Kherson Occupation Administration claimed on March 22 that occupation officials will offer farmers in occupied Kherson Oblast preferential credit rates for purchasing agricultural equipment. Significant activity in Belarus, ISW assesses that a Russian or Belarusian attack into northern Ukraine in early 2023 is extraordinarily unlikely and has thus restructured this section of the update. It will no longer include counterindicators for such an offensive. Belarusian maneuver elements continue conducting exercises in Belarus. Unspecified elements of the Minsk-based Belarusian 120th Mechanized Brigade participated in a company tactical exercise at the Belarusian 227th Combined Arms Training Ground in Borisov, Belarus, on March 22. That's all for today's updates from the Institute for the Study of War. We hope that you found our reporting informative and valuable. Our goal is to bring you the latest news and analysis so that you can stay informed and make sense of the complex issues affecting the region. If you haven't already, please make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for daily updates. By doing so, you'll never miss an update, and you'll be helping us to grow and bring you even more valuable content. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in our next video.